having to do jobs, and I'm certainly one of them. And many folks want to get out of their jobs and would like to retire or maybe be independently wealthy, or they would like to, win the lottery, that kind of thing. And they want to get out of work, and yet Dad was not one of those people. As you can tell from John's address, that Dad loved work. He loved every single kind of job he did, from being an ambassador to being a bus driver, and he put everything he had into it. And all those jobs were tough, and they had their peaks and valleys. And it's like he would bite into those and give it all he had and squeeze as much as he could out of his jobs. And from loading baggage to you name it, he did it. And he seemed to he would complain about it, and then he'd say, well, Dad, why are you doing it? And he just didn't have an answer. It's just because that's what he did. And that's who he was. And in having those positions, he had to let go of a lot and move on from a lot. And so when he left, stopped being an ambassador, he had to let go of all that pomp and ceremony, meeting heads of state. He had to let go of servants and chauffeur-driven cars, and he became this really ordinary guy in Calgary who had a great job at the university. And then that ran its course, and he had to stop being employed and become a retired person. And then he was doing all that stuff that John talked about with the elections, and he was bus driving and all kinds of things there. And at some point, it was really hard for him to stop being an election monitor. And that was really hard on him, I think, internally, but he moved on from that. And all that remained was the bus driving, which gradually petered out as well. And so Dad had to let go of a lot, as all of us do. And I've often wondered why Dad seemed to be able to do that so well and so ably. Because, he struggled on the inside, but on the surface there was this kind of seamless transition happening. And one of the things I think that made Dad who he was and made him able to do this with such finesse was that he was a man who saw life in terms of all its possibilities and opportunities, so that when he was confronted with a limitation, he saw another thing he could be doing. He was always asking that question, well, what's next? Where's the new horizon for me? So that even when he was moving here, from Calgary, he sold his Honda Goldwing, and he said, what's next? What's next? Well, I think I'll buy a scooter, because I'm in Victoria, and scooters suit this kind of place. And then he had the stroke recently, and he lost part of his vision. And so what's to become the scooter, he thought? Well, I'm going to trade down. I'm going to get a smaller scooter, because in Victoria, with a smaller scooter below a certain horsepower, you don't need a motorcycle license. So you people, visitors, could come and use this scooter. So again, limitation, well, what could I do? And that's how he thought, with the loss of vision. He loved to read, so he bought an iPad, because he couldn't read a regular book anymore. And he could adjust the font, the columns, and he could read to his heart's content. And so that's how Dad was. He was always thinking about where to go next, what to do next, and he was incredibly resourceful. But Dad also went through the onion dynamic, which is where you peel back the layers and you find out what's underneath. And so all of the layers of Dad's positions and jobs, they kind of peeled back, and you wondered, well, as he stops being all these things and monitoring elections and driving buses, who's going to be left? And I have to tell you that I loved who I saw in Dad, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, because he just became so Bill and so him. And he was so filled with daditude, He was just like, I'm Dad, and I care what you think about me, but I'm really kind of not very self-conscious about it. And so I'm just going to be myself. And he was this cantankerous kind of guy at times. At times he was, as Lisa says, very contrary, and he liked being contrary. It was entertainment for him to be contrary. He also had that side that Lisa expressed about being very caring and thoughtful, and probably one of the most sensitive people I've ever known. And expressed a lot of that toward Mama, I was witnessing, which was very nice to see. But then there was his humor, and it just was getting out of control. It just kind of raised to the surface, and he was actually kind of inappropriate at times. And the problem is that he thought he was so funny, that you just look at him and he's laughing away at his own jokes, and you just laugh with him. Because he's just like, yeah. And so, Dad was just this amazing guy, and he was just so built and so himself, and I really liked who he was, and who I saw him to be, especially after all the layers had been peeled back, and he was just there to be retired and be himself and not have anywhere to go. And he's the only man I know who would trade a Mercedes for a Hyundai. I never saw the Mercedes. He only had it for a couple of months. And you can get a Mercedes, or you can get a Hyundai that is very plush and very comfortable and very luxurious. Dad didn't get that. He got the second smallest Hyundai you could buy. And why? Because the Mercedes wasn't him, but the Hyundai was. And I have this vision, or this picture in my head, it's the one that I'll keep. And it's, Dad's in the driver's seat because, as John said, wheels, he liked to drive everywhere. And so Dad's in the driver's seat, and Mom is over in the passenger seat, because Mom has been his co-pilot throughout all of life, and has been his anchor here through all of life. And so I see Dad in the driver's seat, and he's got his ball cap on. He's got those wicked, huge Terminator glasses, sunglasses, and he's got this red fleece or maybe an oversized winter coat, and he's wearing his blue jeans and these remarkably uneventful shoes on his feet. And he's driving along, and they're talking about completely inconsequential things that they think are terribly important. And they're going along, and they're just going on to whatever's next, and on to the new horizon. And that's kind of how I see my dad, because that's how he lived his life. I'm just going to finish here with this kind of, I don't know if it's a poem or what it is, that I wrote this week for my dad. Dad, overflowing with daditude, enigma, the surface doer of life, making life happen, stirring the pot, restless with yearning for whatever lurks around the next turn in the road. You wanted more, not ready to depart this life. You fought hard to bend your body to your spirit will. But God, or as Woody Allen put it, the great whatever, God apparently has other adventures for you. Ones that may yet surprise and delight you in ways unimaginable to those of us left here, with the many traces of your obvious existence among us. We know you love us, you did not want to leave us, and grief occupies our hearts. Not always with heart-wrenching sobs,